Right, and we are recording. We're off. Right, okay. So, yeah, welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining this month's Welsh Azure user group on the 16th of March, 2022. No video today. I've removed the video because we had sound problems and we have video problems, and I think we need to re-record it anyway. So watch this space. But as per usual, just putting up the names of all the people that behind the scenes here running and organising the user groups for everybody here. As always, if you've got any ideas, feedback, you want to speak, you want to be part of helping us arrange something, feel free to reach out to any of us. We're always open, well, especially now when we're going to get back hopefully fairly soon to more regular in-person events. We're always open to any assistance or voluntary efforts. Okay, so tonight we've got, well, two fantastic people in the community. We've got our very own Matthew Fortunka, who'll be speaking in the second slot. That's going to be quite a cool one. I'm trying not to give away any spoilers, Matt, but I think I'm going to give it away in the slide fairly soon anyway. So, yeah, so stick around. Matt will be speaking second after Elkhan. So Elkhan's going to join us in a sec and talk to us about using bicep. So how we can deploy stuff into Azure using bicep, which I've only dabbled around the edges. So really looking forward to that session, Elkhan. So as far as timings go, usual kind of format again this week. We might try and mix this up a bit. Again, give us some feedback, what you think works well for it. But we'll stick to the two main talks again this month. So I'll be finished fairly soon. So Elkhan will be kicking off in about 2 or 3 minutes. And then Matt aiming for about 7:30. Do be, active in the chat and take part and kind of get involved and whatnot. And any questions, put them in there. But please do stick to some of the, kind of housekeeping rules as such. So, as always, please do be courteous to each other. There's no such thing as a stupid or silly question. That's what we're here to do, is learn from each other, learn from the speakers. Any question is valid. If you think it's, not going to help somebody, you can guarantee it will. It's the usual stuff. So please do ask some questions. Stay on mute. You've got control of your own mute and cameras. Put your cameras on if you want. It's always a bit of fun and interaction. I always find if you don't want to, not a problem. But you're in charge of your own mute and cameras, as always. Like I said earlier, please do leave us some feedback. It always helps with the user group, with planning these events and really helping us kind of move forward with, like I say, with the in-person events now that hopefully we'll be getting back to within the next few months, I'd imagine. Quiz this month. Watch this space. So yeah, there we go. Giving the game away. Sorry, Matt, but we'll we usually use Mentimeter. Before that, we use Kahoot. Watch your space. So wait for that, and then, like I say, just be interactive. Enjoy the sessions. Please do get involved. Like I say, we're all here to learn. Just a quick note, as usual, again, our sponsors. We're fortunate enough to have 3 fantastic sponsors to the user group that have been massively supportive. I was just thinking about how long ago, how much of a journey it's been over, the last 18 months, Matt, now, I think, isn't it? It's been brilliant kind of journey. I think we're up to about month 19 or 20 now, something like that. Yeah. So been a brilliant ride, and like I say, we've had some fantastic sponsors kind of supporting us behind the scenes with ideas, with quiz prizes, with all sorts of stuff. So big shout out to Servant. I know Des can't join us tonight, he's waylaid with work, but huge shout out to Servant first and foremost. They've been fantastic to us. We've got Admiral, who are obviously centrally HQ down in Cardiff, who have been an absolutely fantastic support to us. And there's some brilliant, fantastic people working down Admiral. I know they've been on some of the events as well and done some talks themselves for us. And we'll probably have to rope them in and get them back involved at some point soon, Matt? But big shout out to those guys. And finally, NetApp. So, big shout out to NetApp for, like I say, with running these kind of community user groups in a virtual world. It doesn't cost an awful lot of money, but the financial backing and the power of kind of retweeting, it kind of helps spread the word. And I guess that's all we're asking everybody that joins. Help us spread the word if you could, because we want to build up that kind of following for the local area, so that when we do go back to face, we have people that can eat all the beer and pizza with us. So, if you can help us spread that. But yeah, that's a big shout out to all our sponsors. For those of you who didn't know, Microsoft themselves have kind of got this Azure Tech Groups thing going on with Meetup, which is basically a collection of all the tech user groups on a global scale. So I know we're up into the 140s now. This was a screenshot from a couple of weeks ago, but I know we got around 140 plus groups under the Azure Tech Group banner on Meetup. So if you do a search on Meetup that you've obviously RSVP'd here, you'll get to see all the other groups. Now, look, there's no such thing as too much tech content, eh? I mean, if you're joining this call, clearly you live by that ethos. So it's just great that obviously when we put a user group up in there, this gets publicized in the same channels. So take a look. There's lots of exciting events, not just in the UK, but obviously globally as well. And that's it. That's it from me. I think we'll just crack on with the show. So at that point, Matt, anything from you before we move on, or are we?
No. Looking forward to tonight. I'm a big fan of biceps, so
yeah, looking forward to this one. So, Elkhan, thanks for joining us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you for invite. Let me share the screen. All right. Let me know, guys, once you see. I'm sharing the same screen that John was sharing a couple seconds ago. Again, welcome everybody to this event, and thank you for organizers, especially John, for doing that with a group of smart people, bringing this session every month, right? So big thank you there, and thank you. So what we are going to do is like, I want to kickstart today with Azure Bicep. And as I see from the names who are participating in the chat, and plus, there's an awesome list of people there, I would like to start with some type of, questions, right? Because I want to tune this presentation toward the expectation of the majority who are joining and want to learn about Azure Bicep. And I don't want to go like too shallow or too deep. I'll try to adjust, but your questions and your participation in chat is something that I look forward to see and help with that, so keep that in mind while listening. And that said, as you know, the first thing is, let's start with some polling questions. John, could you please bring the first question? And I will just reiterate that here on my end. You should see the polling where I'm basically asking how much are you familiar with ARM templates, Azure Resource Manager templates. So please make your choice. Oh, I see the polling as well. That's cool. So let's make choices here. And please submit your response so I can see. So it looks like it's good. A number of us heard about that, but didn't try it yet, which is good. That's why we are here to learn about it. And some of us are doing some play projects. That's good, like half. And we have some pros. So for the people who are pros, probably at the end, if we get some time, I will speak a little bit about ACR, Azure Container Registry repos, and how you can actually integrate them into your, if you are not using it yet. All right, so we have a good number of people who are using and playing with that already. We have people who heard about it but didn't try it that much, which is also good. So that's good. I mean, that's about actually ARM templates, right? So with ARM templates, looks like the majority already played with that and know a little bit. That's helpful. Can we have the second poll, please? Which is going to be the same question, but this time not about ARM templates, but it's going to be more about like Azure Bicep, right? The actual, the one that we are going to focus today. All right, so how familiar are you with the Azure Bicep language? Okay, let's see. Please participate in the polling. That helps to shape up the content and today's presentation. So a number of us actually heard about that buzz. That's why we are here. And some of us are already doing some demos and play projects. Not much use in production at this moment. Some of us are good with ARM, but didn't try the Bicep yet. That's good. All right. Probably that's good enough. So we see that there's a big majority of us wants to learn about that buzz, what's Azure Bicep and what's behind it, which is cool. Let's look at the next poll, please, John. And next poll is simple. It's going to be more about, the question is, did you attend to any previous Azure Bicep sessions? Yes, no. If you attended, what did you like, what you didn't like? And if you can put them in the chat, that would be interesting. I'll check them later, and just to get kind of understanding there. And in case that Cloud Marathoner is a blog post series that I'm running, and I'm going to share the URL for that, the Cloud Marathoner. And the whole idea there is to learn about cloud journey, and plus automation, especially for the beginners. Okay, looks like nope. So it looks like majority didn't actually attended any of Azure Bicep sessions, which is also good. It means it's a great learning opportunity today. Thank you everybody for responses. All right, and the last question before we kick off today's Azure Bicep session, it's about actually it's a bit specific topic about Azure Container Registry private, how to use that. Did you check any of Azure Container Registry private repos use case scenarios that you can integrate into your Azure Bicep, and kind of that would help if you are in a big team and you have certain standards and you want to impose them. So that's kind of purpose behind that ACR, Azure Container Registry private repos. So, and that's relatively new even on Azure Bicep world. It came, I believe, end of last year. So it's still shaping up. So if you don't know much, that's normal. That's quite normal. And majority actually, yeah, didn't have a chance to look in those use cases, which is sounds good. Yep, that's what it looks like. All right, thank you everyone again for participation. That was really awesome actually to see you participating and giving that feedback. Now let's kickstart the session, I believe. Do I need to reshare the screen, John?
No, we can still see you coming through great.
All right, so do you see this next screen?
All good.
All right, cool. Yeah, just double check. Okay, so a little bit about myself. I just jumped into the polling here because that's kind of will shape up the content of the delivery and everything that we'll talk today. But I'm basically have been with Microsoft community for some time, and I was very surprised, being honest, to this year in the basically the beginning of the month when I was awarded the Microsoft Azure MVP, and I still can't believe that it happened, and very honored and for those recognitions. And I've been an MCT, and most importantly, you know, I would like you to direct to this the Cloud Marathoner blogpost.com that I started to create with the purpose of sharing what I learn, especially for the new beginners, kind of to help them in their journey to the cloud. This special flavor of Microsoft Azure, where I have my passion, and plus, you know, help the community. All right, that's it. Now let's jump into the details, what we will be covering today. And today we will start, of course, because there's a variety of different people who didn't heard about Azure. We'll start with quick introduction, what is Azure Bicep. Then we'll look into why to use this Bicep language. You know, what are the goodies that it brings behind the scene, all right? And then what we will do, we'll jump into evolution of Bicep, you know, how it get evolved. And by the way, it doesn't have a stable version 1.0 at this point yet. And you will learn about that today. But it has a stable support from Microsoft, which is much more important, meaning that you are not alone if you get stuck with your Azure Bicep code. You will get official support. Then we'll look into some best practices and some demos just to finalize our presentation. Okay, that's it. First, what's Azure Bicep? It's basically a robotic hand of Azure to help you to manage your Azure resources. In a nutshell, Azure is a DSL, and what does DSL mean? DSL means that it's a domain specific language. All right, and the main specific language for deploying and managing your Azure resources. Then Azure Bicep actually transpiles into the ARM template. So what does it mean? It means that whatever you do in Azure Bicep, at the end of the day, it needs to be compilable into ARM templates, okay? And then once this compiled to ARM templates, it's going to be handed over to the ARM layer of Azure, where it's going to be where the commands and everything is, and the state of your resources, Azure resources, are going to be applied into your Azure environment. And the reason why it was created, actually, it's a transparent abstraction. It's a transparent abstraction over your ARM templates, okay? And it's one of the reasons why it was created is to make sure that you get this simple authoring experience of Azure resources. Before that, what we had, as you remember, and I will switch the slides here. Before Bicep, we had an Azure ARM. We had an Azure Resource Manager templates, right? That were sitting here in the middle, that were talking to the Azure Resource Manager, right? If you remember. And what does it mean? It means that, we have this Azure SD, Azure ARM templates have been there for a long time. It has been there like since actually they renamed from Classic, when the Azure moved from Classic model into the current kind of modern, which happened, I believe, in 2016, around 2016, 2015 timeframe. At that time, ARM template played a big role, which is a JSON representation of your Azure resources. Okay, so basically here, the main point I want you to take off is that whatever you do in Azure Bicep actually compiles into ARM templates. Okay, so if there's an issue in compiling them, and I will show you how it's done from the terminal by using the Azure Bicep build command, but that's like important to keep in mind. And secondly, they all get applied into this Azure ARM, Azure Resource Manager layer, where authentication, authorization, and everything actually happens. And then it is actually sent as RESTful API calls, commands into your Azure environment that we have here under the Azure Resource Manager. Okay, so that's kind of like big picture in terms of where it sits, how it interacts with existing, Azure resources and Azure layer of Resource Manager. Okay, so any questions so far in terms of like, where Azure Bicep sits, what's the ARM templates, and how they're related to each other? If you have any questions, please put that in the chat. I will be checking. Okay. Now next, why Bicep language? Because before investing our time into Bicep, we should know what are the value we are getting out of it, right? We have so much limited time in this world, and it seems like it's just getting smaller and smaller. We can't increase that. So in terms of Bicep language, I would give you like 10 reasons here why you would want to consider that, okay? And first official reason is very simple. It's easy to understand and maintain it. And what I mean by that is, for example, I will switch into the into the Visual Studio Code. I jumped into Visual Studio Code at this moment. Please let thumbs up if you can see my screen. And I'll just take a simple storage account here for demonstration. Do you see my screen? All right, great, John. I see. Thank you. So we see here it's a simple code, right? We have this. We have parameters declared here. We have variables, and there's like simple declaration of storage account, right? Everything is plain and visible. But if we the original way how this resource has been, described and maintained before Azure Bicep was to use the JSON. And how you know that? I'm going to jump the guns here and type the AZ Bicep build. And what it does, this command is going to, let me make it bigger a little. This command is going to take our Bicep and say, okay, it will take our Bicep storage.bicep file and convert that into storage.json file, which is the ARM template representation of that. ARM template. Okay, AZ Bicep build. Then we need to give the file location place, which in my case under the modules. And by the way, all the code that I'm going to show you today, they are all in Azure. They are all in the GitHub. And where they are, if you ask me, let me show that, before we go too far here. Let me see. Oops. I think I need to see if I can. Just a second. Let me show that. So we don't forget about it. So basically, if you go to the GitHub repo handle that I have, and here, if you scroll down and click on Learn Bicep, okay, at that point, you would open this Learn Bicep GitHub repo where all the code like this, the one that I'm just showing you now, it's under the modules, okay, and this is under the storage.bicep. So this is the one that I'm showing you guys. So the same code, if you want to access, it's all actually under the Learn Bicep GitHub repo. You can always go and check it out. Okay, so just put that somewhere so you can, and you can of course share and like it the way you want it. All right, I'm going to go back to my Visual Studio Code. And here where we were, we took the storage bicep, and here's the purpose why I'm showing that. I want you to show how it is simple to understand storage bicep file rather than using the same ARM template, previous ARM template, and trying to manipulate and kind of make it work for you. Okay, so that's the purpose here. So we took the existing storage bicep file, okay, and now I'm going to, all right, I'm going to go to the place where it is. It is under the modules folder. We have storage.bicep, and I'm going to say, okay, AZ bicep build should create. Once we press this command, what should happen behind the scene? It's our AZ CLI bicep module will take the bicep file and create a JSON representation of the same, with the same name, is in the same location where the original file is. So I'm going to go there and see, hey, here I have a new storage.json now. Okay, it's just added. So I'm going to click on it. And of course, I need to double click on it. And I remove the things that I don't need to see. And what we are going to do, we are going to split the screen here for better visualization. And we'll remove this. Okay, so what we got here actually, on the left side, I need to bring the storage.json. It disappeared. Sorry for that. Storage.bicep. Okay, it's there now. Okay, storage.json. I'm going to make sure I can duplicate this one on the right. Okay, we did that. That's great. So let's look at it now. On the left side, we have storage.bicep. Okay, it has two storage accounts. One is called storage. One's having the account name, another one also have another storage account. So we have two resources, two storage accounts. We have certain parameters and variables that are defined here, variables. On the right side, what we have is a JSON representation of it. And if you scroll down, it's quite longer than the original, than the bicep. But if we compare them, you would see that using the storage bicep, it's actually created a JSON representation where we have the schema, right? That's the schema. Then we have metadata that says, what was used for generation of this file. And we have here version of bicep, okay? And then what we have is declaration of parameters that we see on the left side, on the bicep. So here, it's the same thing, but declared with JSON declaration. And we have storage name, okay? We have the location, we have environment, and then we have variables as well. These two variables declared here using the JSON representation. And if you look at them, it is not that easy to maintain, right? Because you have to know details of ARM template representation, and plus you have to invest your time into that, which is not that intuitive. It's a steep learning curve if you have to maintain it. And then I'm going to, if you scroll down, we see that we have two resources, right? We have two storage accounts. One have the account name as a name of that resource, and another one is called test SDG school something 0956. So if you look at that on our ARM template representation, you would see that, okay, first resource is, if you remember, this is the account name parameter that we had. So that's how it is declared in ARM templates in JSON. This is the variable that's used for SKU name. And this is basically our first resource, first storage account that's coming on our bicep here on the left. Then what I'm going to do, we can also look at the second one, which is represented here. As you see, it's same storage account name that we saw on the left side, and it has parameters that you refer to. So why I was showing this to you guys, right? So why we looked into this. This is just to make sure that you understand that there is actually a good mapping between what you put in the bicep that get created in arm templates. But the difference is that if you have some coding experience or you did some, let's say, infrastructure as a code type of scenarios, you will find this much easier to understand, maintain, and learn than going and jumping into the arm template here on the right side and trying to figure that out, because this is not easy. It's much, more time you would have to spend here if you make a typo. Yeah, there's a tooling in Visual Studio Code that can help you. So I don't want to kind of, say it's, you are going to be left alone, but still it's a much steeper learning curve than Azure Bicep code of represent to be used to represent your bicep language. So any question regarding these two? So when you look at these two things, then you understand that, okay, maintaining and managing your infrastructure, your Azure infrastructure in bicep language is not just going to be easier to start with, but is also shorter. So here you have to maintain, like, literally, if I take this line here, literally what you have to maintain is less than 25 lines of code if you remove, the spaces. But on the right side here, where you have the, ARM template representation, you have to maintain at least, double of it, right? And once you use the Azure Bicep language modules and other things, that's just going to be growing and growing. And to give you example, later I will give you an example where we'll use a complex scenario from your real world where you have, under one subscription, you have multiple resource groups, multiple resources under resource group. And then if you try to visualize them and look at them, that difference is going to be very stark, very big. And of course, nobody wants to, maintain big number of lines of code for their infrastructure as a code. The smaller, the better, less time you have to spend on it. Okay, that's kind of like number one thing that I want you to take into account, that Azure Bicep, whatever you invest into that, is going to make your life much easier and your support will be much better. So coming back here, so we started, that was kind of small demo into comparing, right, what we have in Azure Bicep and what we have in ARM template. This is basically Azure Bicep robotic arm, and this is your ARM template diagram here on the right side. So it's easy to understand and maintain bicep language. That's kind of first advantage you get. Second, it has a day zero support. So what does day zero support mean? If you want, you can type that in the chat just kind of to check your understanding. I would be happy to look into that. But it means that whenever there are changes into the Azure resources, into their API, into the capabilities that they actually expose through the public API that they have, that support is going to land right away into your bicep language resources and you can use them right away. While that's not the case with other tools, it's not the case with third-party tools like Terraform, Pulumi, or anything that you might be familiar with. So that's day zero support gives you advantage that if there was a bug or something happened, let's say there's a security issue or whatever it is, you will have a support for day zero support to act upon it right away. So you don't have to wait for that third-party application to release updates or something like that. Third-party library, sorry, not the application. Okay, next, transparent abstraction. So what it is, we looked at that in diagram, meaning that whatever you have in bicep language code is going to be, transparently abstracted into your bicep language. So your ARM template is transparently abstracted into ARM template. And then it has awesome tooling in Visual Studio Code, which will look more into that. Okay. Then clean code and syntax, you saw snippets of that, but you will see more going forward. Then we have a great tool, a great deal of code reuse and modularity. You have similar kind of, you have similar support regarding ARM template, right? And if you can type in the chat, I would be interested. Do you how you can reuse the ARM templates? If so, are you remember that linked ARM templates and nested ARM templates? So those things, of course, you can do, but it is not as easy and sometimes can get very pretty messy when you are dealing with that, because it's harder to maintain that structure rather than using this Azure Bicep modules, which I'm going to show you. And the next is there's a deep integration with Azure. Again, that's done through Visual Studio Code plus through the API support that you get with Azure Bicep. Next, you have pre-flight validation. And what it is, it means that you have your Bicep language code, right, that describes the Azure subscription environment where you have your resource group, you have your resources like, your web app, your storage account, your SQL Server, whatever you have there. So this pre-flight validation, if you want to apply some change into your existing environment, or let's say it can be also new environment, you can see what are the actual changes are going to be applied into your environment before deploying your code. Meaning that if there is any issues in your Bicep language code, you can get early warning, early errors before actually starting deploying your code, deploying your resources into the Azure environment. So that's where pre-flight validation shines, and I will show you some samples of it today. And there is no state management, so you don't have to have another separate file to manage state of your existing Azure environment if you are using Azure Bicep. That's not the case for other third-party tools like Terraform, where you have to actually make sure that you manage your state actively, right? There should be a separate file in Terraform where you can have to maintain that. And if it get corrupted, then it's a big trouble for you. All right, and finally, production support. Azure Bicep is not just, a tool that you can play and kind of, learn about it, but it's something that has a production support behind it. And what I mean by that is that starting from the version 0.3, Bicep version 0.3, you have official production support so that you can open ticket, Microsoft ticket help from the help desk, that URL that you officially getting your technical support from, and just ask the issues that you are experiencing with Azure Bicep. There's a dedicated team to support you with any issues that you come up with. Okay. Any questions so far? I just don't want to just talk here. Any questions regarding this reusability and why? Okay. Thank you for first question. I see question. Doesn't Azure DevOps do some of the same things as Azure Bicep? Basically, what Azure DevOps does is Azure DevOps is more like an orchestration tool, right? So where you want to kind of hook up into certain processes so that you can take your Azure Bicep code, build it, kind of validate it, do your pre-flight validation, and then deploy to the environment. So Azure DevOps is more like a orchestration tool, right? That initiate this continuous integration, continuous delivery part of it. But Azure Bicep is more like a tool that you use within your Azure DevOps. Okay, does it make sense? Any other questions, guys? That was awesome question, by the way. Keep them coming. All right. So because time is ticking, I want to go a little bit further and let me know if there's any questions. But if you go ahead and type this command, all right, if you go and type this command called Azure Bicep list versions, which I'm going to do, by the way, we should get this list of versions. And as you see, it started with the alpha and now it's on 0.4.1318. So what does it mean? And what those versions actually mean? So it means that it's actually started as an alpha version way back in 2020, end of 2020. If we speak exactly, it's actually happened in August 28, 2020, when first time get the alpha release here. And then first supported version, again, for the opening the Microsoft ticket and stuff like that, started from this version here, 0.3.1. And currently, starting from the version 0.4, it became more mature. It's more mature, sorry. And here, currently, we are on this version 0.41. And what's the difference, right? So what happened over the time is you get first your technical support in place. Second, you get your latest version updated with Azure private registry support of the repos, which is basically if you have a set of libraries already created in Azure Bicep and you want to share across the team using some Azure Container Registry, where you basically version them and have access. That's what you can do, and still in progress, that type of feature. And expected version 0.5 is going to be released, according to Bicep team, it's going to be released in March, later this March 0.5. But here's the takeaway, guys. Why I put this slide together is just to make sure that when you install Azure Bicep, you know that there's easy way to upgrade your current version of Bicep into the latest one or into the version that you want it to be. And secondly, Azure Bicep is still evolving. It means that there might be a number of things that are still getting kind of hammered down in terms of some of the naming. I believe like a month ago during the Azure Bicep community call, they were speaking about how we can standardize this, the way how we get the Bicep modules from Azure Container Registry. Okay, so there's a lot of things going on that are fluid, but a number of things are already hammered down, and you have an awesome tooling support with Visual Studio Code. Okay, we have another question here in the studio from Stefan. Thank you, Stefan, for putting that question. When using the resource types, do I have to specify the version, the date behind resource type for each resource type? Yes, for each resource type, you have to specify the API version of that resource. Because there are many different API versions of the resource. Let's say storage account has different APIs, and you have to specify that one. That's required. Next, can I mix and match versions of resource types, or do they need to be the same to be consistent like resource provider version of Terraform? No, you can mix and match versions. There's no such hard requirement. And as far as I know, but if there is something else like that, let me know. Okay, so another question from Michael here. Does Bicep contain all equivalent modules that are available in ARM, or are new modules added with each version? Okay, that's a great question. So basically, all the existing resources, Azure resources, they are available right away. Okay, whatever we can get in ARM, we can get in Bicep as well. So, and currently, they are not adding new modules. What they are doing is more like making sure that certain level up of expectation with ARM is met, so that they can make so that Azure Bicep team can make an official release into 0.5 and then to the stable version 1.0. I hope that answers your question. If not, if what I said doesn't answer your question, please clarify your question and I'll make sure it's answered. Okay, one more question and then we'll move forward. Why should I use Bicep and not Terraform? Okay, you mentioned day zero support. So one of them is day zero support. Okay. Second thing is here's thing, I don't say you should get me correct. So Terraform itself is a very good product too. Okay, I'm not against that. What I'm trying to say is that there are certain advantages and disadvantages you have to take into account when you are making choice between the tools as a team. And of course, first one is how much familiar you are with that tool, right? Second, are you going to use that tool just for your provisioning in Azure? Okay, or you're planning to use the same set of tools for provisioning into different clouds as well. That's another consideration you need to take into account. And after you have that answers, and if your focus is only on Azure, then you may want to invest your time into Azure Bicep. But if currently, again, Azure Bicep is the main specific language, meaning that currently they are focused on supporting only deployments and resource management on Azure environment. But what will happen in the future, nobody knows. So that's why, depending on your requirements, your team kind of purpose, and clouds that you are dealing with, you have to make that sound choice based on the facts. I hope that answers your question. And Azure Bicep is idempotent. Yes, so basically once you have whenever you redeploying, your Azure Bicep language code, where you can have certain change in the properties of the resources, is going to basically look at the existing one, and if it's already exists, okay, it's not going to do anything. But if there are certain properties that are not set, okay, or there was update on them, then it's going to act upon that and provision that resource. All right. Okay. I think let me and okay, stable version is expected to happen this year. All right. So if you remember, there's another report that I have started with the community support called Azure, Awesome Azure Bicep, where you can get a lot of tips and learning points to learn about Azure Bicep. So I also encourage everybody to go and look at that, check it out. Okay. There's a number of contributors here on the left who actually made their PR requests and contributions into this repository, public repository. So I strongly advise you to go and look and check it out. There are a number of official resources and there are community resources as well. So you'll find this very handy when you start learning Azure Bicep. Okay. Next, Azure Bicep is actually, it's a cross-platform, meaning that that tooling will work on any operating system, any well-known operating system that it works on Mac, it works on Linux, so you are good there. Okay, then we have this Azure Bicep First Look video course. You can check that on LinkedIn. That's another course that can help you with learning. Okay, that said, now I'm going to switch the gears and introduce what is the bicep config file. Did anybody in the office actually or in the studio had a chance to poke on Azure bicep config file? What's inside and how it can help you? Anyone? Just type in the chat or make a thumbs up on the on Visual Studio Code if there is any experience with that. But what it is basically, while I hope to get some of the responses on the Teams channel. So in Visual Studio, not Visual, it's a VS Code, right? Visual Studio Code. We can set a bicep config file, and this is good if you want to set certain standards for your Azure Bicep compiler to catch up. For example, if there's a parameters that have some issues, or you want to make sure that if there is unused parameter or there's a hard-coded name, you want to catch them up and make sure they don't end up in your production Azure resource files. There's a way to do that using bicep config file. And why you would need one, again, to enforce certain team standards, certain kind of compliance things that you want to see in your infrastructure as a code when you generate your bicep language code. Okay, and next we'll look into example how you can create analyzer and as well as module aliases. They are very handful set of tools. And what are the default configurations? We look there. So let me switch here to Visual Studio Code and let me know, guys, when you see. Please thumbs up or something when you see the screen that I'm trying to bring here. All right. I see. Thank you, John, for your response. So here what we see is now we are on a bicep config file. And where I got this, basically on that repo that I just shared, which is your repo under learn bicep GitHubs, you would see that here in the close to the bottom before the code of conduct, you have this bicep config JSON file. All right. And what is this file supposed to be doing, right? Let's look into that. First of all, this is good thing to set up for your team, and it has around like 12 to not 12, it's like around 15 rules. So I have some of them here. They are under analyzer here, and if you read these rules, they are pretty well explained in terms of what they're supposed to be doing, right? And in terms of no hard-coded environment URLs. In my case, it's set to warning, but in your case, let's say you have a compliance saying that, hey, there should be no hard-coded environment URLs. At that point, you can actually set it to the error here, as you see. So, and what does that mean, right? If you set it error, so what? So if you set it on an error, then instead of having this yellow squiggly line, you would be getting this red squiggly line. And if you try to compile or even deploy your Azure bicep code where you have this bicep config file, it will prevent you from deploying. Okay, it will prevent you from deploying the hard-coded environment URL within your infrastructure as code that you created using your bicep language. So that's the beauty of it, you know, to enforce the compliance, whatever is required for the project that you are working on. Then we have other options like you can set it as a warning. You can set it. You can switch off that rule if that's not applicable to you, and you can just have it as an info. So it's up to you, you know, up to the environment and compliance requirements you are dealing with. All right, and I'm not going to cover others, but I'm going to jump here to the other kind of module aliases. So if you are dealing with actually something like ACR repos, Azure Container Registry repos, where you actually save the code, right? In my case, I deployed bicep, some of the bicep modules there. Then you want to set this, and once you set it, you will have easier way how you can actually use them. And what I mean by that, I will not jump right away, but let me show you on the example what I mean by that, because that would clarify it, I believe. So in this case, let me make it bigger. So I have this, let me take this out. I have this, you know, my demo resource group, okay, and I have this same Azure ACR. And what it is, it's basically once you click on it, okay, this is the way how you can actually push your team code into the ACR, okay, Azure Container Registry, and have them versioned there for the project. So in repository here, if I go there, I have this bicep modules app service, which is one of the modules my project is supposed to be using. And if I click on that, I would see different versions like version 2 and version 1 here. And what does it mean? Oops, let me make it. Oops, once more. Better zooming here for the folk. So we have, as you see here, we have two versions, right? Version 2 and version 1. What it is, it means that, let's say, while developing this module, right, you first start with first cut of the requirements, and you know that that app service needs to have, for example, application inside part of the deployment, and there's certain specific properties that you need to set it up. So you can deploy it as version 1 and then use it in your Azure, in your bicep code. And then once there's an evolvement and change in requirements, you can deploy the same thing as a version 2 and change your bicep to use the tag version 2 in order to get all those updates. Okay, and let me show you how you can work with that. Okay, let me show you how it works, right? This is good but let's see the, you know, actual. So if you want to see that in action, I would say go ahead and open the modules, and not the modules, sorry, it's under the samples. Under the samples, go to this deployment kind of sample called 15, deploy using the private repo. And what it is basically, if you click on it, you would see that first of all, it says, okay, we put that, it's a red actually, failed to parse this content, that's fine. So here what we have is, this is the name of the bicep file I'm referring, and because one-to-one, that's why it's doing this. But step one is basically you need to create that Azure Container Registry using your, you know, Azure CLI, PowerShell, whatever you want. But another way is to use your bicep, right? So what I did, I created this module ACR Registry Bicep that's actually deploys creation of the new ACR for you, okay? And then you need to basically follow these steps, okay? And once all the steps are followed, here we have a squiggly line at the point. So it says that core modules, there's something in the core modules is not able to do anything. Probably it's because of change that I did. Let me see. Yeah, here it is. I have some issues here. Let's fix it, right? It's a good kind of, so here what I did, I basically didn't put it, right? I changed it, but I didn't put, that's why I'm getting those errors. Let's actually fix this. Okay, so there's no error in my bicep config file, or otherwise it will, you know, end up to be, you know, you see this thing, that red squiggly line that I had here is gone now, correct? Previously, because we basically tampered. I fat fingered my bicep config file, and that's why, you know, some issues start to pop up. So that was the reason why we see that. But here what happens actually is that because we put that alias, whenever we type this, what happens is that your code, basically your bicep config, from bicep config, it would define what does this core modules actually stand for, okay? And then it will load that from that ACR, from that Azure Container Registry, and then based on the tag, okay, it will assign the correct one. If you don't put any tag there, would it work or not? You would have to experiment with that, but that's part of the fluid requirements that Azure Bicep team is working on, and they are trying to finalize it. Okay. All right. So this is the way how you can do that. But let's see that in the action. So so far, before jumping here, okay, let me show you one more very good example how complicated your Azure Bicep and your Azure environment can get into and how to deal with that. Okay. So let's look at this example. So we have here deployment of many different resources using the modules. And if you remember, modules are the way to modularize your code and make sure you can use it, reuse it. For example, here in this, let's look at, so for example, Cosmos DB module, right, that you see here. Oops, let me take this out. All right. This Cosmos DB module. So what it does basically, it's going to reuse these modules that I created within this repo and basically use it internally. It's not going to take it from the ACR, from Azure Container Registry, but it's a local one that's under the folder modules. If I click on it, you need to press on Control then dot click. All right, here we go. This is the definition of that Cosmos DB a resource that's going to be deployed. So I'm going to go back, but it is hard. Let's say it's first time you're seeing this code, right? It's first time you are seeing this and you try to understand what's going on. All right, this is a brownfield project that you joined. Then the easy way to analyze this is actually to use the tool that's called Bicep Visualizer. So if you click on this tool over here on the top, let's click on it. What it will do, it's actually will generate the nice visual representation of those things that we see on the left side here. And as you see, it consists of multiple resource groups, and there are some resources under them. And this is pretty cool because you now can click on them and basically get, you know, I think we are running out of time, so I will be a bit shorter here. So if you click on it, why I showed that, if you click on this resource, let's say Cosmos DB that we just looked at it, right? Let's double click on it and it will bring you the actual resource it is representing, which means that you can fastly navigate between each resource using your Bicep visualizer here in Visual Studio Code. And how this magic happens is because here under, if you click on extensions and type Bicep, this magic happens because we have Azure Bicep extension installed. Okay, I should be starting actually from there. So make sure that you have this Azure Bicep extension installed because all those auto-complete visualizer and everything actually are part of this extension that's provided by Microsoft. And this is very, it's a great tool just to make sure that you install that and you keep that updated. All right, that said, we looked at a number of things here, and I'm going to fast forward here. I think we don't have much time, but you can always, check the repos and the demos that I have. One of them is you can have your own automated GitHub workflow, and one of them you can see on Learn Bicep. If you go and look at the actions on that repo, it's there in action. You can actually, integrate that into your own GitHub free of charge because it's a GitHub workflow, right? So you can do that, your POCs, your demos using that great automation tool if you are not using Azure DevOps or you have some limitations in that. And then it brings to the, I'm not going to, I'm opening now floor for the questions because I know that you joined here with some questions and Let's spend a couple minutes here before we hand over to the next speaker. Any questions, guys? Feel free to put them in the chat. I will be happy to respond and kind of direct you into the certain resources that you need to look into to resolve your issue. But I'm happy to speak about, again, about Azure Bicep and navigate and look into the issues that you are working on, and be, you're helpful in making sure that you actually not just like the Azure Bicep, but see the value in using Azure Bicep and learning that early on before it actually hits the version 1.0, because then you would be ahead of the game. You would know how to do your infrastructure as a code in a proper manner using the Azure Bicep language. And here it is, before ending this session, here are the QCR codes for the resources that I showed you. So one of them is Learn Bicep on the GitHub repo. Another one's Azure Bicep First Look course that you have here. Bicep project is the official project of Microsoft, and you have awesome Azure Bicep resources. And please, fork them, like them, and make sure that you have them under your tool belt. Yes, we have a question, I believe, or something.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the awesome presentation, man. Really love it. And nice that you gathered all the links to the relevant repositories. Makes it really easier to fetch the right information. I do have a small preference question. We had templates which featured large objects. So we had all kinds of examples. We stepped down from that and we've introduced more de-objecting. So we parameterized everything. What's your preference and why do you like that? Because some really like the large object approach and others like the defaults from the parameters, for example.
So I would say that really depends, right? It's all boils down to reusability. So you want to spend time for parameterization and make sure you modularize certain things if you are going to reuse the same type of resources across your solution, right? So at that point, you don't have to kind of reduplicate. It's kind of like software development life cycle, kind of good practices that if there's something repeating across, and there's a way to kind of minimize the footprint so it's easy to maintain and it's automated. That's where you want to spend a little bit of cycles of your sprint just to parameterize that, make sure you have certain modularization there, and it will help you in a long way. Would that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, guys? Awesome.
Yeah, Sebastian had a question about a repository. Yeah.
So another question about do you have a question about repository or what was it? I didn't get it.
Oh, sorry. No, there was a question in the chat from Sebastian about is there something like a Terraform registry? I'm not familiar with that, but where I can see all the details to each resource and search for the resources.
I'm not a Terraform expert, so to say, but if somebody knows in the audience, please, chime in. Maybe there is something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I dropped a link into the chat about the Bicep resource reference.
For Bicep, yes. For Bicep, there is. I thought they are asking for Terraform. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that, Matthew. Yep. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, guys. I don't want to hijack the Matthew session. Matthew, you are the next. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Elkhan. Really appreciate that. Great session as well, by the way. Really got a lot out of that personally. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Absolutely. And yeah, we will catch up soon. Thanks, Elkhan.
Thanks.
Okie dokie. Matt, just hand straight on over to you, shall we?
Yep. Just let me share up. Everyone should be able to see my screen.
Yeah, got you.
So as you can probably tell, I'm trying to do this without slides. So you're going to have to put up with the clacking of my keyboard because it's rather loud, I'm afraid. And the mic is right next to it. So good evening, everyone. For those that don't know me, my name is Matthew, or Matt Fortunka. I'm what's called a digital and app innovation cloud solution architect at Microsoft. And that mouthful basically means I spend my day talking to customers about developer technologies. And there's all the kind of standard how to get in touch with me kind of stuff. Now, for those that have been joining the Welsh Azure user group for a while, you know I've been kind of one of the founders of this for a little while now, well, pretty much since day one. And I've also sort of fallen into the role of our resident quizmaster. And this has been a lot of fun, and I really enjoy doing these, and they're great to do. And up until end of last year, we were using a product called Kahoot, which some of you may have heard from, and that's great. But we were actually using a Microsoft license for it, and then suddenly Microsoft said, "Oh, we don't want to pay for that anymore." So we were like, bummed. So Dean, I think it was Dean, kindly lent us his license for a thing called Mentimeter. And we've been using that quite successfully ever since. But around about the start of the year, there was one of those kind of odd conversations I was having with people about how hard would it be to actually write a quiz. One of the advantages of this is that I can do my talk now, and then at the end of it, we can do the quiz using the software that we've written, and I've shown you through the talk. So it has a double benefit for me. My history is I've been a developer for more years than I care to mention. In fact, I've been working with .NET since day one. In fact, since the preview bits back in the early 2000s. And I've got a history of building kind of obscure little web apps and obscure mobile apps. Now, when you think about building a quiz, let's think about what the moving parts are. So we've got a client app, which is the thing you will all join later. We've got a presenter app, and that's the thing that controls moving on to the next question and showing the answers and things. And then a quiz is basically made up of a question set, which is a collection of questions. Questions are basically multiple choice. This is how you find out how good my spelling is when I'm typing at speed. And then questions typically they've got a title, they've got some possible answers, they've got an image maybe, and hopefully there's a correct answer. Now, there's actually another part to the presenter app as well, because there's the whole creation of a quiz, which is a separate app in its own right, effectively. And then when you start thinking about what a quiz is at a very fundamental level, it's a very basic state machine. So if you think of it from the point of view of the presenter, I'm going to start a quiz, I'm going to wait for users to join, and then I've got this repeating cycle of sending a question, waiting for all the answers to come in, showing the results, and then repeating that until the end when I show a leaderboard. Which I actually missed out. There you go. Copy and paste the wrong one. Display who won. For the players, it's a very simple thing. You know, I join the quiz, I provide a username, I wait for a question, I provide an answer, I repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. So with the realization it's not, in theory, a complicated project, that leads to two decisions. One is, how am I going to do the UI? And it leads to a decision about how am I going to coordinate the comms, so the messages going back and forth between the clients and presenters. Now let's park the UI for a minute, because that's a it won't be my licensing SKU, it's all MIT license, so it's all good. So we'll come back to the UI in a minute. Let's think about messages. Now, in the old days, you would have the clients and presenter sharing some kind of shared state, and they would be polling for updates to that state. And the reason you need polling is because HTTP is designed around this kind of request response, and not these kind of long running keep a socket open for a long time and let it run. So let's go to a quick demo. I've got here a very simple API, and actually it's just looking at a storage queue. I've got a storage queue, and actually it's running on an emulator on my local machine. And I've got a request that says, let's go and check for some messages. And then I've got another one that lets me post messages onto it so I can test stuff. Now, at a very simple level, I've got this web page here. And this web page doesn't do very much, really. When it starts up, which is this bit here, I'm going to start polling. I'm going to go and get messages from my API. If I get a successful response, I'm going to write those messages out to this list that I've got here. And then I'm going to sit and sleep for 2 seconds and then repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. And if we see that one in action, I'll bring that one up. And that one down there. We can see, if I have a look at my network tab, we should see, let's just refresh it a minute. Come on, where's my messages gone? So you can see that there's this long poll running, and that's just basically a console message that just says, go get some messages, go get some messages, go get some messages, go get some. And it works. And frankly, I can go and post messages onto it now. So I can go and say, let's go and send a hello world message, and it'll poll, and then I can send another one, and that'll eventually come through when the 2-second timers come up. But ultimately, that's really quite hard on the browser, because the browser's sitting there in this kind of tight 2-second loop, just going message, 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 message. And then along comes this technology called WebSockets. Move that one out of the way a minute and stop that. Just bring up my other browser, which I had better results with. Okay. Along comes that technology called WebSockets, and WebSockets basically says, when you establish a connection, let's effectively keep a pipe open between the server and the client. And what that means is that you're not polling now. You're basically pushing these messages from the server down to the pipe once the connection's been established. So I've got a similar thing here where I've now got a message connection where I set up a WebSocket connection, and then an equivalent API thing here where I do the same thing. So we set up our connection to our WebSocket, we sit and listen, and then when events happen, so when I get this on message event, I do exactly the same. I write those things back out again. So let's run that one, and we can see what that looks like in there. Open up the other browser window, please. That's better. So if I now bring that one up and we refresh, we'll see this socket connection established. We should see a socket connection. So there's my socket connection. And then any messages I send down it will get posted through this channel. Should get posted through these channels. Going with that now. Have I killed my server? Just do a quick refresh on that one. Oh, I haven't sacrificed the right chickens to the demo gods tonight. Where's my WebSocket? Messages. Yeah. It's died. Something's died. Oh well, we'll come back to that. So in essence, the messages will fly down that, or should fly down that socket. Now the problem with that is that socket connection is established between an instance of my server. Yes, thank you very much. We might need Menti, although someone would have to set up the quiz very quickly in the next half an hour. We've got to set up effectively a one-to-one connection between that server and my browser session. So I'm effectively creating a new session each time on the server for that. And that's great if you've got a modern browser that supports WebSockets. What you want is something that will basically say, if your browser supports WebSockets, then use them. If it doesn't, then let the software that I'm using fall back to doing the whole long poll thing. And that's kind of what SignalR does. Shut that down a minute. I don't know quite why that's not working. And my SignalR thing here is I've now got a SignalR hub. And my SignalR hub is now waiting for messages to come in and then posting these messages out to my browser. And SignalR is what is called multicast, which means multiple clients can subscribe to a single hub, and I can then push those messages out. So let's hopefully see if this one works. These. Something is very not happy here. So we've got a WebSocket connection. There's my network. Let's just restart that again. It's set up my WebSocket. And then I should have messages coming in. Now I updated Edge just before I started this, and I'm wondering whether or not I've broken stuff. Oh, there we go. We've got some data coming back and forth. Oh well, not important. So in theory, if it was working properly, I would establish a connection to my hub using SignalR, and effectively every browser could get that same connection. So when I post a message to my server, every browser would get that same response coming back. Let's park that bit and move on to something else. Now, SignalR is great when it works, clearly. But the problem with the way that I'm running this is that it relies on a whole set of in-memory config. And that's great up until the point where you're running in the cloud, where you might have multiple servers. And what you need to be able to do is to send, is to have your clients connect and still be able to survive effectively the random reboot of a server because it's being patched. And to that end, you need a thing called a SignalR backend. And the SignalR backend is the thing that does that kind of load balancing for you. Now in Azure, there's a thing called the SignalR service. And there's 3 different tiers. There's free and there's standard and there's premium. And premium, I think, went GA today, which was kind of timely. And they vary by the amount you pay and the amount of the SLA you get. So I think premium has a 99.95 and supports auto scaling and all kind of wonderful things. Okay, so that's the messaging piece. On the UI side, now, traditionally, if someone said, let's go and write a web app, you would go, I'm going to write something that uses JavaScript and that uses whatever shiny framework of the day is. The downside for me as a .NET person is that modern JavaScript has a really steep learning curve. You can start talking about things like, you know, ECMAScript, TypeScript, NPM, Gulp, Grunt, Webpack, linters, test frameworks. And that's before you even start talking about the UI frameworks to actually render something to the screen. And then you've got your Reacts, your Angulars, your Vue.js's, your jQueries, your Sveltes, your Preacts, your Backbones, your Embers, your Polymers. You've got to pick a tribe in this space. And the downside to that is that once you're on that tribe, you've got to then maintain your position within that tribe. Angular, for example, has a major release every 6 months, and major releases are supported for 18 months. So it does mean that every 18 months you've got to be keeping track with their updates. Now, let's talk a little bit about Blazor. Now, Blazor, at least in one of its incantations, is built on this thing called WebAssembly. And WebAssembly, according to webassembly.org, is defined as a binary instruction format for a stack-based virtual machine. WASM is designed as and that's the nickname for WebAssembly, is designed as a portable compilation target for programming languages, enabling development on the web for client and server applications. The translation for that is that you can compile your apps in languages that you know to a binary format that can then be run in a secure browser sandbox. And it's been around for a while. And in 2017 at NDC Oslo, a guy called Steve Sanderson, who was the creator of a JavaScript framework called Knockout.js. So in Norway, he demoed this, a version of what would become Blazor running on WebAssembly. And by that, I mean, it's .NET code running in a browser. And it uses this idea of Razor components to render HTML. And Blazor actually comes in 2 flavors. It comes in a thing called server-side Blazor and Blazor WebAssembly. So let's start with Blazor WebAssembly, and we'll just go and open up the very basic application you get. If I go and do start new application, Blazor WebAssembly in Visual Studio, this is what I'll get. And what you'll see is this combination of sort of fairly standard HTML, Razor components, which are almost like these custom HTML tags, and then some C# code. And if I now run that, and hopefully this bit at least works, you will see an application come up. And here's an application, and it's got a very simple counter on it, and it's got an API call that it goes out to go and get this data, and then we can go and click that again and do some more of that, and we've got navigation sections. And none of that is running any JavaScript at all. If we have a look at our sources, you can see these kind of compiled binary form files, and this is our WebAssembly files. And that's all my code and all of the parts of the .NET framework I need to run to be able to get this to work. And again, this is great and it's wonderful. And it means that I don't have to think about JavaScript anymore, which, yeah, I've got a love and hate relationship with JavaScript. Now, same as kind of WebSockets, not all browsers support WebAssembly. Although I will say that if you're running a modern browser, and I even include Safari in that, you are going to be able to run WebAssembly applications now. It's funny. It used to be IE that was the butt of the jokes, and now if you talk to web folks, then Safari is the one that always causes them the most problems. Now, what would be nice to have is some kind of way of being able to do that kind of programming language, but in a way that was compatible with older browsers. And that's where the thing called Blazor server-side comes in. If I go back to the same kind of stock app here, and this is almost exactly the same. It has a thing on there called builder.services.server-side Blazor. The files will look pretty much identical, I think. If we go to the counter one, there we go. It looks almost, in fact, it looks exactly the same because it is exactly the same. It's using exactly the same formats. And the difference here is that Blazor WebAssembly actually uses SignalR. So under the hood, all of the rendering is done server-side and then pushed forward to the browser. And the client-side libraries that are used by Blazor server-side push tiny incremental changes up to the browser when it changes. So it effectively uses that permanent socket connection to push up tiny, almost diff changes to the UI. And what this means is that when I run it, it'll look exactly the same as we had before. And it'll work exactly the same as I had before. But if I now refresh that and we have a look, hopefully this bit works. You can see that somewhere down there is a WebSocket connection. And that will be pushing these tiny little binary messages back and forth. And you see like 32 bytes. They're really tiny little serialized packets that are going back and forth. And you'll get others there. So that's the slightly bigger one, which will be the data coming back from that API. So all of the actual logic is happening on the server, and only then the diffs are being pushed up to the client. How are we doing on time? Excellent. So you would think that when it comes to writing a quiz that's going to need some sort of communication between them, and we've already kind of gone, yeah, SignalR is probably the way to go, that server-side Blazor would probably have been the way I should have gone. And the hint is there. I should have gone. I went for WebAssembly because it was a new and shiny thing and I wanted to have a play with it. So let's talk about kind of how the quiz itself is structured. And we're going to do that with a very, very simple, very lightweight example. So I'm going to shut some of these down to free up some memory. Shut that one down as well. Is that my other one? Yep. We're going to go to another project now. I would, if it would open. We'll stop that one as well. Don't need that one. So what I've done is I've just created a very, very simple Blazor WebAssembly project. And it's actually got two parts to it. It's got a client and a server. And it's got a server because I wanted to have a SignalR hub that I could call. All of the actual client code and all of the C# processing will be run in the browser. But I've got the hub there just so I can show some messages going back and forth. We're going to start with our page. This is a very simple empty page. This declaration here says this is the path that I will be called on. So if I wanted to go, I don't know, test 1, that would now be my URI where this page would come from. And I've got this razor component there, and basically that sets the title on my the title on my browser bar. Now what I'm going to do is add some very, very simple code here to show this off. And we're going to start with, I can just find my notes. I'm going to start with, we're just going to create a div, and then we're going to create an unstructured list. And then I'm going to add a title up there called incoming messages. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fill that list with some data. We're going to add another div on there. And we're going to add an input text box type. Yeah, I'll do. And then we're going to add a button so we can submit things back again. So, button. That's it. I'll just call it send message. So it's not going to do very much. In fact, we can run that, and what we'll get is a very boring page. Clean. That. And that will build that, and we've got a very, very simple page that's there, and nothing's doing anything. It's effectively a dead page at the moment. So let's add some code to that. I'm going to add my code section. This is where I'm going to write my C# code that's going to run on the browser. Now I know I need to have some kind of handler for this button, and I'm going to write that as a public void send message. And I need to do something with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a list. So I'm going to say private list of strings messages equals new list of string. That's just somewhere to store the messages that I'm going to display. And then when I get a message in, I'm going to have somewhere to hold the message that text field is going to have. So I'm going to private string new message, currently empty. And what I'm going to do is when that button's pressed, I'm going to go messages add new message. When that button's pressed, it'll write whatever's in this variable into that list. Really simple stuff. Now, I want to bind this text box to this bit of C# code. And remember, this is C# code we're binding to. We're not binding it to some JavaScript field. I need to use these special bind value operators and say, I want to bind this to my new message. Now, whatever is written into this text field will update this field here. Similarly, I want the button to be triggered. So I'm going to go at on click. I'm going to give it the name of my method that I created. So now when that button is clicked, it'll add whatever is in that field to that list. Now we want to display these things, our list of messages in this list. So I'm going to go at for each bar message in messages. And then I'm going to combine some HTML with my C# code. Now, when I run this, whatever I type in here will get added to this list. That's all C# code, all running in the context of the browser. And that's cool, but that's kind of not what we want to show off. We want to show off the whole kind of communication piece, because actually right now this is all running in the context of one browser window, and I want multiple browser windows to interop with each other. So let's start adding some SignalR stuff in. So I'm going to copy and paste from here into my hub project a method. And what this is going to do is when this method is called, a string is going to be passed in. It's going to use the built-in SignalR method to broadcast an event out to anyone that's listening. So we're going to go clients.all send async, send this message, and then broadcast out the message that was passed in. Now clients.all is just one way of doing it. I can group people up. I can go client.groups. I can target a specific user as well if I wanted to. So now our code in our page needs to be updated, and I need a couple of dependencies, which I'll bring it up here. And we're going to create a new object, and our new object here is a thing called a hub connection, and this is the thing that our browser uses to establish to talk to its SignalR hub. And then we're going to use a built-in method. So when the page loads, there is a method called onInitialized. No, async that one, wrong one. Then I'm going to create my hub connection, and I'm going to point it at the endpoint that I've exposed on my server. And then I'm going to start. And that's great. That I can now interact with this hub connection. I'm not going to get any messages back, and I'm not going to be able to send any messages yet. So let's modify our send message call to post that message to our hub connection. Why is that? Oh yeah, because I need to change that to. There we go. Now, if I want to get that message back, I need to listen for the event coming from SignalR. So I'm going to do hub connection.on. It's going to return a string. My message is called incoming message, and I'll get a value back. And all I want to really do is add that to my list when it arrives, because then it'll be displayed in that list that we've already set up. Now, because this this event is happening kind of outside of the normal flow of a page, I need to let the page know that something has changed, so it needs to be re-updated. So we use the built-in state has changed model. So that very, very simple bit of code now, if I run that, initially, you won't see a lot of change, assuming SignalR's playing. So if I type there and then send, I'm still going to get those messages being written out. The interesting part comes if I open up another browser window and bring this one over here and then send some other message, I now get that both ways. So I've now got effectively a chat app happening between the two. Okay. Now, if you think about that in terms of the context of the quiz, now we've got potentially a client app and a presenter app. So I've got a presenter that can have a special case with special events that it's listening to, and a client app that's got special events that it's listening to, and knows how to handle those messages and change its screen accordingly. So let's store that. Let's go into the quiz code. Now, this project, I'll put up a link into GitHub, the repo that it's all available in at the end. Interestingly, based on Elkhan's talk earlier, this has all got bicep files for deploying it out into your own subscription if you want, and there's some instructions on how to do that, and it's all wired up into GitHub Actions if you want to deploy the code up that way as well. So, and you'll see some similarities. So this is my client page, and that's actually using this thing called the client component. And what I've done is I've decided to break out my bits of code into smaller units so that I can effectively reuse them in other places. And we'll show how that's quite useful in a minute. And my client component will look very similar. It's got a lot more code in it, but actually it looks very similar. So there's my hub connection. These are the events that I'm responding to. And then these are what happens basically when buttons are pressed. So there's register user, answer question. And in my presenter, again, it looks very similar. So there's my hub connection. There's another event that I'm responding to, another answer that I'm responding to. And this is really useful. Having these broken out into components is really useful because I can then do things like, here's my game test library. And this is the one that I've been using for testing, where I can actually run both the presenter and the client and multiple clients side by side. So if I go game test, you will see is, hopefully, I've now got two versions of that quiz running. So my presenter on there, and I can test this with up to X number of instances of the client if I need to. But that's a bit of a preview for later. We'll show more of that in a minute. Where have we got to? So the project itself, in the same way as our little demo project, has a client, it has a server. The server has the hub in it, and the hub is just doing effectively what I showed you in that previous demo. It's not doing anything particularly clever. The only difference is here that I'm, instead of doing clients.all, I'm basically grouping people into a quiz ID so that I can target which people get particular which messages. And then we've got a models library. The interesting part about this is I've broken it all up into components so that each kind of individual section of the quiz, so the join quiz is a very, very lightweight little component that then gets used by my client component. Now, one of the things I've done here is to make sure that the client, the presenter part needs to have AD authentication. And I don't know if you've ever done this in JavaScript, but actually trying to set up AD authentication in a JavaScript application is quite complicated. So thankfully, in Blazor WebAssembly, it's really, really easy. In that effectively, I get to drop in a component. There's a package that comes in. I go, let's add this authentication. Let's add some configuration settings. And then my presenter thing now has this additional view on it that says, if I'm authorized, then show that component. If I'm not authorized, then redirect to logon. It's really simple. And that's now tied to the tenant that I'm hosting this on, so that only people who are members of that tenant can actually then edit and manage that quiz. What else? Oh, on the monitoring side. Monitoring side's an interesting one. So I've got App Insights wired up into this. Now, if you've ever used App Insights before, there's usually two parts you instrument code. You instrument the backend APIs, so your C# code, your Python code, your Java code can all be instrumented using App Insights. And then there's a JavaScript library that you usually put on your web page to do the kind of the feedback for what browsers your users are using, or what countries they're coming from, or what performance characteristics they're getting. As of right now, there isn't a client-side library that Microsoft create for Blazor WebAssembly. So what I've had to do is use a third-party component or a third-party NuGet package that basically just wraps up the JavaScript call. One of the nice things about WebAssembly is that there's a certain amount of interop you can do between JavaScript and the WebAssembly. So because I've got the I think it's in there, isn't it? Yeah, because I've got the App Insights JavaScript files loaded, I can then have those interop with the code that I've written. So I can do things like, if we go and see here, I can track individual events. So I'm tracking everything that happens in the quiz, every state change that happens in the quiz. And that leads to some interesting data. So if we go and bring up this one a minute. open. Hang on a minute. I shall. Bring this down here and go on to quiz time. And if we go into our App Insights project, so we can go and see, not in the last hour, I'm going to need more than that. Let's go last 7 days. There should be some data on there. So we can see I've now got data between my server and my SPA, my single page application. And we can see where those requests are coming from. So I can see that I've got outgoing requests out to the SignalR service from both the client and the server. I've got a connection to blob storage, which is where I'm storing the quizzes. And I can see the performance characteristics between the two. I can also then go and see specific events. So if I go and have a look at transaction searches in the last 7 days, you should see somewhere down here some custom traces. No, I'm going to have to go and do a something client. So I should have. Let's try question. There we go. Client question arrived. So this is data from an event I did on Monday where we tried this out. And you will see, oh no, that's from me testing the other day. Oh no, it was from Monday, yeah. So we can see that actually I can see at any point what that username was of that person that did, what the question was they were asked, and whether or not they got that answer correct. And we can then do all kinds of performance map metrics and checking for exceptions and things like that within that data. Really, really useful stuff. We can also then look at the failures that we're getting, as you might expect. So basically everything that you would expect from that. The actual deployment of this consists of, there's an app service plan and a web app. There's the App Insights, there's the SignalR service, and there's a storage account. I've estimated it costs me about $3 a day if I leave it running all the time. And there's optimizations I can do to bring those costs down. The reality is it probably won't be left running all the time. It'll probably be brought up when I need it. So compare that to a Kahoot enterprise license, and you're quids in effectively. So the optimizations I'm thinking about at the moment is whether I can move the back end to Azure Functions and the front end to static web apps. I would get the consumption benefit for some of the calls for functions. The SignalR resource there. There we go. So we can see the connections coming in. Right now, I've got that set to standard, which means that I'm capped at 1 million messages a day, which unless we've got a hell of a lot more people joined, I don't think I'm going to be struggling on that one. And you can see roughly the cost of those kind of things as well. So go quickly back, see if I've missed anything. No, I think that's it. So in a minute, we're actually going to do the quiz. We're going to go and run, and I've got a quiz set up that's ready to go. We can see if I go on to my quiz there. This is actually the editor for it, and we'll run the other quiz, so I won't show you the answers to the current one. And we've got a full editor in there, so we can go and actually amend those quiz questions and see those and tweak those things. So there's lots of stuff in there that we can play with. Discard that. So before I start the quiz, are there any questions? Stunned silence. Very stunned silence. Are you all just keen for me to get on with the quiz? Is that what it is? So the advantage about that is, so the use case for the quiz, any limits? I don't know, is the short answer. I'll drop that in the chat. We've tried it with about 26 people on Monday, and I think there was still capacity there as well. Your limits are going to be pretty much the performance of the machine running the presenter and that scale limits on the SignalR service. So if you try to run that on the free tier, you're going to run out of messages fairly quickly, I think. I'm running it on the app itself is running on an S1 web app. How do you start with Blazor with no previous programming skills? I would certainly look at the MS Learn tracks. There are some really good YouTube tutorials on there as well. And I would follow people like, who would I recommend? I mean, if you've ever listened to something like .NET Rocks, I would recommend listening to people like Carl Franklin, who does a series on YouTube called Blazor Train, which is really good. And they start with the beginning. There's a whole load of videos that Jeff Fritz does as well on some of the Microsoft channels. Is that the Jeff Fritz one? I think you put there, isn't it? That one's. Yeah. Yeah, I suspect that's the Jeff Fritz presentation. So I would say if you're interested in wanting to be able to do client-side browser stuff, but don't want to have to learn JavaScript, then Blazor is definitely worth a look. So Chris, you mentioned about license. It's a public repo. I ought to put a license file on there. I'm not going to make it any more restrictive than MIT. So if you want to have a play with it or fork it or add issues to it, I've already got a backlog of things that I need to look at and need to think about. There's a whole load of things that came out of the session we did on Monday that I need to kind of go back and revisit, and I'm going to keep on editing this because I suspect and I hope going forward at the Welsh User Group we'll continue to do this stuff. Any limits on what Blazor cannot do in comparison to JavaScript currently? Interesting question. Probably because you're with JavaScript, you're actually running in the confines of the. I mean, WebAssembly is effectively running on top of JavaScript. So what you can't do in Blazor, you can effectively shell out to the JavaScript libraries. So you can do some level of interop there anyway. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just about on time. So shall we give it a go? Let's do a present. So there's an AKMS link there. And if the SignalR gods are shining on me, I will sit and wait to see people arriving. And as people are arriving, just have a think about what's happening behind the scenes. So you're loading up a web page, you're posting a message, that's going off to the SignalR hub. I'm getting an event that says, oh, look, someone's joined, and then adding something to a list. Exactly the same thing we did in my demo. I did have someone on my call on Monday try to put like HTML and JavaScript tags in there on as their username. Please don't do that. I can't guarantee what will happen. Thankfully, the HTML tags I was all right with, but. So I've got 4 people there now.
I mean, I'm in awe, Matt. I'm watching this, saying on every word, it's brilliant. But we want to tell everybody this is the actual quiz now, isn't it? Yep. This is the chance to win some prizes. I'm
going to rehost it on a different subscription, but apart from that, I might even put a domain on it as well. I've been mulling behind it. Over.
Watch the watch the phone now. As soon as we start tweeting about get yourself a free Kahoot, watch how much that yeah, repo grows.
That's the one thing I was a bit kind of I don't want to get sued. Please don't sue me. Nicholas, if you're doing that, just I would try do a Control F5 on it. Ooh, that's interesting. I've already bought enough useless domains. Thank you, Andrew. I don't want any more. My name not showing. If your name is not showing, then try again. Try and do a refresh and see if it'll let you back in. This is all really useful. Yeah, so you will see phone says more, waiting for more people. So as soon as I hit start, if Google did it, don't worry, it'll be retired within about 3 months, so it won't be a problem.
Yeah, an interesting one that Bitdefender blocks it.
Oh, okay. Oh, because it's WebAssembly, I bet.
Yeah.
Ah, that's interesting. So that's the other reason why I should have gone server side, because actually at that point then you would just have to have WebSocket connections open. Any more? So you should get to a screen that says waiting for more people. Is anyone still struggling to get in? About 9 people in there at the moment.
Yeah, I'm still struggling.
But Jake is saying he's not sure what to do. Browse to that link there, Jake, or take a picture of that QR code and follow the AKMS link. Hopefully you should see that. Enter the quiz ID then, isn't it, Matt? 6270.
And then give it a username.
Yeah. Anyone with issues on work PC, just use your phone to get in.
Yeah, I'm using my phone, iOS I'm using, so.
Nice. Excellent. Good to see. Good to see. Right then. Another couple of minutes. Another minute or so.
Matt, before you start, do you think it's easier to interact with the quiz on a web page or through the phone? I'm really competitive. I want to win.
It depends on how much thing I've done on the mobile styling.
You built this on a desktop, yeah?
I have built this on a desktop, so yes.
I'll stay where I am. Thanks very much.
So ultimately, because what you're creating is effectively HTML, all of the same kind of styling stuff is still there. So it's still Bootstrap. It looks very Bootstrap, I think, if you go and see the designer and the editor and those kind of things. So yeah, it's still using all those kind of the JavaScript and the CSS like wrappers around. So hence the thing with App Insights as well. Okay, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1, go. VNet integration was added to the preview of which, spelt terribly, product this month. And all the prizes for guessing what the colours of the buttons were and the letters of the buttons. Oh no, is no one in?
No, it's just waiting for everyone to answer, mine is saying now.
Oh no. Oh, sorry, Toby. I don't know quite know. I'm going to have to go and dig through the logs and find out exactly what happened there. We had about 9 people answer, so there's a couple of people that have missed out. Name this Microsoft executive. Yeah, the colours on the questions are the Xbox buttons, just because I was lacking inspiration and had a controller sat next to me at the time. Yeah, sorry, Nicholas. It's going to evolve. This is basically an extended load test for me. Where is North Europe Azure region located? So this little timer thing here is actually it's a JavaScript library. It's a Canvas app that I managed to pour into Blazor.
If you could mirror it, that would be lovely, because it's really ruining my my head. The fact that it's the opposite way around.
Oh, are you seeing a mirrored image, are you?
Well, I'm seeing it go backwards in time. I guess that's right.
It's counting down, Dean, yeah. It's how long you got left, not how long you...
It's weird.
Which application got enhancements for app service in Linux in February 2022? Yeah, I think I even flipped it round actually at one point.
I feel like it's the wrong way.
I have an issue. I can
It's
ignore
great that
it.
it gives you, yeah.
Just in the middle of a quiz at the moment.
What's the name of the software that implements both WebSockets and long polling in the browser? interestingly about Maui, Maui's not the right answer, clearly, but Maui is the mobile technology. And one of the things that they've just added to Maui is a Blazor WebAssembly host. So you can actually create Blazor WebAssembly apps and then host them on a mobile app. What conference was .NET running in WebAssembly first demoed? Were you paying attention to the quiz? To the talk? It was NDC Oslo was the correct answer.
I like the feedback that it tells you what place you're in.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Lunch Bites launched on February the 23rd on Learn TV. What was the first speaker's topic? Very close to my heart, this one, because I was the first speaker.
Have you built in the fastest finger first for the score as well?
Yep. Doing all that as well?
Wow.
Does it automatically end when everyone's answered?
Yep.
Wow.
Jeez.
API management and DevOps was the answer to that one. I can talk about how all that stuff's implemented as well, because that's an entirely different challenge. Which of the following is not an infrastructure as code technology?
I'm going to have to stop answering all these questions correctly, Matt. I'm not.
Well, no one got the last question right, so, you know. So what it might not be doing is if it's not completing immediately, it's because we might get some people that are stuck in a weird kind of half state. Blob storage offers how many storage tiers? I ought to have how far we are through the quiz as well.
Yeah, I'm going to say you should put the question number as well. Question 3 of 10 or whatever it is, you know.
Yeah, that's the bit that's missing. It's 4. Hot, cold, cool, and archive, if I remember rightly.
I think what Chris Writer said about the phone interface is a bit correct as well.
Yeah, I've got to do some stuff around the styling for phone. Cognitive services made up of which 5 components? Was that the last question? Does it say on your screen? It doesn't say on mine.
I hope not.
Doesn't say.
Ah, no. Default storage redundancy option for Azure SQL Database Hyperscale tier. I love that name. That's definitely a marketing department name that. It's RAGRS. Is that the last one?
Another question is on its way, it says on my screen.
Okay. Which CLI command lets me turn ARM templates into bicep files?
Crunch.
Elkhan did mention this. It was a lucky guess on my part that he was going to mention it. AZ bicep decompile.
That was the last question.
Congratulations to our winner, Man Bear
Wow.
PA. Well done. So Ellen and John, you don't count. So Real Sebastian. Well done all.
So Manbear Piet.
Yeah, it's just Pete, sorry.
Pete. That's Christian, is it? Christian, I'm guessing.
Yeah, Christian Pete. Yeah, that's me.
Right,
Yeah.
Christian. And Elkhan, is that you, Elkhan?
Yeah, it was me. So you can skip me if you want.
No, not if it, well, you know, obviously ask Real Sebastian, you can fight it out. But no, it's up to you, Elkhan. You're as much as a guest on this this show as a presenter as well. So I don't think there's any problem with that. So we'll get, so basically it's 2 £25 Amazon vouchers, so 1 each. Christian, drop us your email address over either in the chat here or via one of the social medias. And Elkhan, yeah, I mean, I don't know that you want to give it up unless you're feeling uber generous. I think it's fine for you to have the prize.
I will give it up.
Yeah, you sure, Elkhan?
Yeah.
What a gent. So
Very
Real
good.
Sebastian, in that case. Who is Real Sebastian? I'm looking through the name list now, looking for Sebastian. Is that you, Stefan?
Yeah, that's me.
Right. You have now won because Elkhan's given up a £25 Amazon voucher.
Thank you very much.
There we go. No problem. No, it's drop your email, drop it in the chat, or IM me or DM me on whatever platforms that you're connected to me, and I'll get that arranged. But look, back to Matt. I know you've ploughed straight into the quiz, Matt, but honestly, that was absolutely fantastic. That was blooming awesome from what I saw there. Everyone give it up for Matt. I think, yeah, watch out. I think I can see him on the Scott Anselman show now, Azure Friday, talking about this in about a month's time. So get your autographs in now before he goes straight.
If anyone wants any help setting this up on your own tenant, just give me a shout, and I'm more than happy to assist there.
That was awesome, Matt. Well done. Cracking stuff.
No worries. Thanks all. I'll unshare.
Right. I'll quickly share the last couple of slides to close out this month's show, if I can find the button. But yeah, if everybody just fill the chat full of love for Elkhan and Matt for a second whilst I find my share button.
The thing I preferred about Kahoot was actually the music, Matt. Have you not considered putting music on there?
Oh, well, give it time. I'll add it as an issue. Don't worry. I'll stick
Thanks
it on.
very much. I'm not a GitHub user, so I can't add issues, I'm afraid. But please, yeah, please.
You can see now that issue log is just going to grow and grow and grow now.
I'm doing it now. Add music.
Matt, what's the name of the company that you're going under now for this when you leave Microsoft?
Not going to ask.
No. Right, let's wrap up then, everybody. Oh, sorry, Matt, go on, say again.
Drag me out kicking and screaming.
Oh, there we go. Bleeding blue. No, everybody, thanks so much for joining tonight. It's been really good fun. Special thanks again, just to reiterate, to Elkhan, the Talk for Bicep. Brilliant. Matt, overwhelmed, blown away, brilliant stuff. I'm sure this is going to get a huge amount of feedback. So huge thanks to those two talks for tonight. Moving into next month's show, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't find my buttons anywhere. Next month's show has been released. You may have seen an email come through already. If you want to RSVP, save the date. We've got 2 more fantastic talks. We've got Keith coming to join us to talk about how to become certified in Microsoft. So going to talk us through all the options, the availability, so help us spread the word on that one, especially if you know any junior folk in your organizations. Just see if we can get some people, spread the word to get them on, because that'll be a really valuable session, I think, for people that aren't really doing a lot of certification at the moment, and really help people into the industry. And then we're going to have a talk from Anthony Mashford, who's going to talk to us about deploying enterprise file storage. I think that's NetApp Files he's going to be talking about. So 2 really cool talks. Hope you'll agree. Go on RSVP. And that leaves me nothing more to say, but thanks for attending, everybody. It really is appreciated. Like I say, you can help us spread the word about the Welsh Azure user group. It really would be great for us, and hopefully at some point soon in the summer we can all, those that are in the vicinity, of course, we can chink some glasses and have a beer at a local pub whilst streaming this out in our hybrid event. We'll have to borrow Dean again for that one, I think. But if you can give us some feedback, scan the code, go into the link, give us a little bit of feedback, that'd be appreciated as well. But for now, I think we're done. Anything else that you want to add, Matt, or anybody else? All good?
No, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you everyone for listening.
Let's go and see our families. Cheers all. See you all soon.
Yes.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.